Whatever you do, at the crossroads, don't turn left. If you've been on the internet lately, you might have heard those words before. They come from a Minecraft ARG, searching for a world that doesn't exist. The YouTuber Waffles goes over the story of Avery, someone who found a laptop and a locker with Minecraft already installed. He played in a world that was already created, until someday he finds a mine with a chest he didn't place, and a book he didn't write. At some point in the video, a code appears that leads to a Google Drive with some footage. It shows us the same world but with a different player. By the items in the inventory, it looks like it was taken before the YouTube video. Here, the player begins to strip mine and finds an entrance to an unknown cave system. What unfolds there is your usual Minecraft horror video, although with not that many cheap jumpscares. The only thing I want you to keep in mind is that something is following the person in the footage, and that it can read the chat messages. At last, he is faced with a huge stone wall with a code. The story continues in the second video where the protagonist, that now we know it's called Dirlord, claims he has solved the code. It was double-ciphered, and he mentions it was a nice poem, but unfortunately for the Puppet Master, he was in Minecraft and breaks the wall. He arrives at a village. It was completely abandoned. The most relevant here was the yellow decorations inside some of the houses. After searching for a while, he finds a house apart from the rest, where we get the most information about this place from a book. I hate it here. These idiots are insufferable. They think that devotion will save them. Rest assured, it will not. The ones who realize it pretend they didn't. But it doesn't help that there are some of them who truly believe they'll be saved. The king is coming for me. I wager that their king is already here. It's watching me write this. I just want to be done with this. The sooner I can leave, the better. He's arrived. I don't know why anyone is surprised to find that out. This is exactly that they were hoping for. I'm going. I'm leaving this here. In the rare case someone finds it, if you have found this, I implore you, turn back, disconnect, forget about this world, it is not for you. If you've come here, you must be curious. I know you must want to continue onward. So, I know that this is a heavy ask, but please, do not go any further, for your own good. Do not. Ignoring all previous warnings, Dirlord finds a passage behind some bookshelves, arriving at the infamous crossroads. Of course, he turns left. He enters a completely dark tunnel with only two giant golden doors standing in his way. The doors were half closed, and behind them, there is something waiting for him. Whatever the blacked out thing is, it was censored during the editing process. He stares at the thing for no more than 20 seconds before turning back. This time he goes right. It led back to the mine from the beginning, and he writes a book, warning Avery about the crossroads. Whatever you do, don't turn left, over and over again. And Waffle teases us with the second part of this series, but most of the internet has already cracked what the thing behind the golden door was. The entity haunting this world and Dirlord is none other than the King in Yellow. It is said that the sight of the king grants some kind of higher knowledge and turns those with feeble minds insane. That's why whatever was behind the door was censored by Dirlord, for the safety of whoever finds this footage. But this left a lot of people wondering who even is the King in Yellow, and left others confused about the nature of this creature. And that's exactly why we're here today. Today we'll be trying to figure out who exactly is the King in Yellow. We'll be here for a while, so without further ado, let's get right into this. For starters, who is or what is the King in Yellow? The King in Yellow is a book created by Robert Chambers in the late 1800s. The book contains 9 short stories featuring the presence that is sometimes more or less subtle, depending on the story, of a play called, well, The King in Yellow, aside of the mentions here and there of Carcosa and Hastur. Its first story opens with a poem describing what Carcosa even is. That is the opening of the play. Along the shore, the cloud waves break, the twin suns sink behind the lake, the shadow lengthens in Carcosa. Strange is the night where black stars rise, and strange moons circle through the skies. But stranger still is lost Carcosa. Song that the Hyades shall sing, where flap the tatters of the king, must die unheard in dim Carcosa. Song of my soul, my voice is dead. Die thou unsung, as tears unshed, shall dry and die in lost Carcosa. A somewhat vague description of the king's realm, but at least we know what Carcosa is. Carcosa is a realm beyond the stars, a decaying kingdom, and the king is the god and ruler of this realm. And I'll give you a direct answer of what aspect of nature or what the King in Yellow is the god of, based on the time that the book was written, and the most logical explanation I believe to be is that the King in Yellow embodies decadence and the futility of trying to preserve beauty. You see, aside of being associated with madness and fear, during Chambers' time, Yellow was very present as part of an artistic movement, the decadent movement. You may recognize this as the darker aspect of the Victorian aesthetic, the opposite of the fancy, polished and lavish style we usually think of. Think more of the greasy, sickly yellow and rusted depictions of the Gothic art, the ones we usually see in all the illustrations of Warhammer 40k, visions of human banality, the poisoning of the air with drugs, perfumes, excess, and those heavy, overbearing and dirty clothing mixed with the facade of high society, trying to keep the morbidity and macabre aspects of the human nature hidden. I might be wrong in some words used in this interpretation, you can correct me in the comments, but I believe the main idea is there. In some stories there's also the mention of Hastur. Hastur is understood to be the ruler of Carcosa, and Carcosa is described to be in ruins. It is a decaying kingdom, somewhere beyond the stars, where the souls that fell victim to the king's machinations end up. And when we think about it, what better color than yellow to represent decay? Most white appliances and white plastics turn yellow due to UV exposure, if not taken care correctly, just as some types of white painting. Sulfuric acid, the most common acid we think of, is yellow. Sulfur, it's often associated with rot, and is one of the main chemicals released by decomposing bodies. Some people are obsessed with white-colored teeth, even if it's not healthy or natural. All of this just to avoid being seen with tinted yellow teeth. The ichor suffering from infected wounds is yellow. The color of dry or sick leaves is yellow. Hell, even when the coat of an AI breaks down, makes the thing vomit piss-colored images. If we don't take care of things properly, if we let rot or decay enter our surroundings, something will turn yellow. Yellow is always hunting us. Carcosa is waiting for us. When we look into the inspirations of Chambers' work, we find other novels and books dealing with the King in Yellow. He draws heavily from Edgar Allan Poe's The Mask of the Red Death, in which a masked stranger visits a wealthy prince's castle, where he holds a masquerade while the peasants are dying of a plague called the Red Death. The prince finds the stranger perturbing, as his mask is made to look like the face of a Red Death victim. He demands the stranger to remove his mask. However, when the prince tries, he drops dead. The other nobles tear off the stranger's robes and masks, only to find nothing underneath. They began to drop dead as well. The final lines being, "On darkness and decay, and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all." While the nobility held parties, indulging in their excesses, and the common people died outside of the ivory towers, disease and decay eventually reaches them all, reminding them they are not beyond its grasp, that their attempts were futile. It is futile to flee from Carcosa. But okay, with that context out of the way, what do the stories of the book even say? We'll be going through a third of the tales, since it's not really necessary to go over each of them to get the idea. The first tale takes us to a dystopian 1920s New York, and follows a man named Hildred, who sustained a head injury. During his time in bed, he ended up reading the play called The King in Yellow, a book that was wildly banned, not due to its content, but the effects it had in its readers. He becomes obsessed with the play, and meets the Repairer of Reputations. That's the title of the story. A man called Mr. Wilde, who convinced him that he is an heir to the Imperial Dynasty of America, which Wilde says is descended from a lost kingdom within the distant stars in the Hyades, and that his cousin, Louis Castaigne, stands in his way. Realizing that Hildred is still mentally ill, humors him, but becomes angry when Hildred insists that Louis cannot marry his fiancée, Constance Hoberg. Louis is shocked when Hildred claims that he has murdered Dr. Archer and had Constance assassinated. When Hildred runs back to the apartment of Mr. Wilde, there is confusion in its dark doorway. Wilde's cat rushes out as Hildred is trying to enter. Hildred's long knife flew. Then hears the cat tumbling and thumping about in the darkness, and Mr. Wilde lay on the floor with throat torn open. The police arrive, and Hildred sees Constance crying as he is dragged away. It is ambiguous whether or not Hildred actually committed any murders. And the story ends with a note that Hildred died in an asylum for the criminally insane. Here we see the first mentions of the Star Dynasty of the King, and the titular play which is present in most of the stories, the play that announces the presence of the king, or his influence in the characters. If it was a bit hard to understand, don't worry, that was definitely the intention. To put us in the shoes of the fragmented mind of Hildred. When Hildred read the play of The King in Yellow, he was infected by it, leading to the events of the story. And as a heads up, the cat is also said to embody the king presence, or it's a manifestation of the king. A white cat with yellow eyes. This is since the king is also described to have a pale face. The second story is titled The Mask. The story is told in first person by a young painter, Alec, who is involved in a love triangle with his friend Boris and their shared love interest, Genevieve. Boris was a talented sculptor who completed works representing figures such as the Madonna and Cupid. Through an unusual chemical process, he managed to produce a mysterious liquid that turns living beings into pure marble. He demonstrates a solution to his painter friend, Alec, in a lily and a goldfish. The second part focuses on the daily lives and dynamics among Boris, Alec, Genevieve, and their mutual friend, Jack. After a series of events, Genevieve and Alec both succumb to mysterious fevers. Boris tends to Genevieve as she succumbs to the illness, while she is taking care of Boris in order to distract himself from distress, turns yet another fish and a rabbit into marble. Alec avoids witnessing this and instead turns to reading the play The King in Yellow. Still feverish, Genevieve wakes up briefly and says Alex's name. While Alec is astonished by this, Boris tries to comfort his friend, saying, "It is not your fault, Alec. Don't grieve so if she loves you." Alec hurriedly leaves, concluding that he is going to be ill as well. The last thing he remembers before was Jack saying, "For heaven's sake, doctor, what ails him to wear a face like that?" Which reminded Alec to the pallid mask in The King in Yellow. After Alec recovers, he is told that both Genevieve and Boris died. Apparently, Genevieve fell into the marble solution. Alec inherits Boris' house and sculptures, but spends 2 years in self-exile before moving into his new residence. One April afternoon, drawn by an irresistible force, Alec finally opens the sealed doors to the marble room. He discovers Genevieve lying under the Madonna's tender gaze. Overwhelmed, he kisses the marble and retreats into the house. As he sits in the conservatory reading a letter from Jack, a maid interrupts, speaking of strange occurrences, like a live rabbit replacing the marble one. Frustrated, Alec investigates, finding the marble Easter lily transformed into a fresh, fragrant flower. Suddenly, understanding, he rushes back to the marble room. Genevieve, alive and flushed, wakes from her marble slumber, greeted by the heavenly smile of the Madonna. As you can see, the play is also here, but it ends up in a more positive note, although somewhat tragic this time. Alec, the one who interacted with the play, was benefited by the supernatural nature of that illness. He ended up on the top of the love triangle, keeping Genevieve for himself. And as you can see, he doesn't feel right. And maybe that's precisely what the king wanted. He is feasting on this tragedy and the betrayal of these two friends to fuel his ego, or maybe the beauty and tragedy of this act is exactly what's amusing him. Overall, it's very clear that this time, Alec was wearing the mantle of the king, since he had this so-called white mask on his face. The last tale we'll be looking into is The Court of the Dragon. Here, a man speaks of his experience at the Church of Saint Bernabé, where he noticed that the organist began to play a dissonant note, and he could swear the man was staring at him with hateful eyes, but he didn't pay much mind to it. He thought he was being paranoid due to him recently having read the play The King in Yellow. To his dismay, the organist followed him all the way to his residence, looming over him with a dark semblance. He was cornered. He closed his eyes, preparing for the worst, but suddenly, he was back at the church. He had fallen asleep. The organist sat on his place, and this happened. The people faded away. The arches, the vaulted roof vanished. I raised my seared eyes to the fathomless glare, and I saw the black stars hanging in the heavens, and the wet winds from the lake of Hali chilled my face. And now, far away, over leagues of tossing cloud waves, I saw the moon dripping with spray. And beyond, the towers of Carcosa rose behind the moon. Death, and the awful abode of lost souls, whither my weakness long ago had sent him, had changed him for every other eye but mine. And now I heard his voice, rising, swelling, thundering through the flaring light. And as I fell, the radiance increasing, poured over me in waves of flame. Then I sunk into the depths, and I heard the King in Yellow whispering to my soul, "It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God." Okay, this is definitely the less subtle of all the stories. The other two that are slightly relevant are the Yellow Sign, where a young couple is murdered by what I can better describe as a man driven mad by the king's influence after the girl finds a pendant with his sigil, the Yellow Sign. The other story is about a poor artist who finds a white cat with yellow eyes in his apartment complex, until he finds the owner of the cat thanks to some rumors he heard. The owner was a girl that was waiting for him all this time in her bedroom. There were a couple of red flags here and there in her apartment, but he didn't pay much mind. You see, even back in the 19th century, writers knew that the Hello Kitty type meant danger, or what's the same, falling victim to other forces. Curiosity kills the cat. Curiosity led to obsession, and obsession led to this madness. And, by the king's hand, madness leads to decay and death. And to Carcosa. But of course, these stories have multiple interpretations, but they'll come back to the same topics, decay and obsession. But unlike most of the later Lovecraft entities, these are seen in a very human manner. Carcosa is described in terms we do understand, unlike the non-Euclidean geometry of Relie or the unfathomable depictions of the Shoggoths. Now, how does the King in Yellow came into Lovecraft mythos, and the version most understood of the King in Yellow? Howard was a fan of Chambers' work, and integrated some elements of his stories into his own. The King is not featured but widely mentioned in The Whisperer in the Dark, where the names Hastur, Yellow Sign, and Lake Hali are mentioned. It wasn't after August Derleth, a contemporary author and friend of Lovecraft, proposed the idea of the Cthulhu mythos and gave the King in Yellow a place among the dark pantheon of the Old Ones and other space abominations most people are familiar with. According to him, the king's name was Hastur, also known as the Unspeakable One, him who is not to be named, Astra, Kaiwan, Asatur, the Feaster from Afar, the Peacock King, the Dweller in the Depths. He is one of the Old Ones, a spawn of Yog-Sothoth, and half-brother of Cthulhu. As I said, he is mostly mentioned in Lovecraft works on The Whisperer in the Dark, and the most presence he has is a group of cultists. Later in the story, it is said that the Migo, a species of aliens, have been attacked by followers of Hastur, and Hastur is an enemy of the Outer Ones, whom the Migo serve. And I quote, "Actually, they have never unknowingly harmed men, but have often been cruelly wronged and spied upon by our species. There is a whole secret cult of evil men. A man of your mystical erudition will understand me when I link them with Hastur and the Yellow Sign, devoted to the purpose of tracking them down and injuring them on behalf of monstrous powers from other dimensions. It is against these aggressors, not against normal humanity, that the drastic precautions of the Other Ones are directed." His realm is located somewhere on Alpha Tauri, better known as the Red Star of Aldebaran, on the Hyades star cluster. The thing is, Lovecraft doesn't go much in depth on what Hastur actually is. According to Derleth, yeah, he's part of the mythos, but the HP never wrote anything about him, other than what was already written by Chambers. But before coming back to what we saw on Searching for a World That Doesn't Exist, I wanted to mention one piece of media that perfectly encapsulates what the King in Yellow really is. Fear and Hunger is a series of RPG-style games where we are thrown into a merciless world where dark gods rule humanity. The closest thing there is to a benevolent god is a conqueror Christ, and some pagan deities that only care for humans as long as they embody their own nature. These games take more inspiration on the works of Murad with Berserk than Lovecraft, of course, but Rare, the moon god, and some abominations we see in the first game are more akin to the Cthulhu mythos, and we can find two very explicit depictions of the Yellow King, mainly the Sulfur cultists. Sulfur is a hateful god. Sulfur is associated with madness, death, anger, and all the negative aspects of humanity. It is the closest thing in this universe to a biblical devil. Besides, there's this plot where the sulfur cultists supplant the worshippers of the moon to empower their deity. This is just like Chamber took inspiration from an even older book, Height of the Shepherd, featuring a god of shepherds named Hastur to create this malevolent entity we now call the King in Yellow. But the most on-the-nose reference to the king has to be that of Legard. Legard is a character akin to Griffith. He wants to be a god, to ascend to a higher state of being, to leave a mark on this world's history and play a part on the greater scheme of things. But in the end, it amounts to nothing. Legard was just a tool used by other demigods to extend their influence, but he believed he was above all of this. He pushed forward, convinced himself he was the man of the prophecy. He basically embodied the King in Yellow, but he was just a pawn. He wanted his kingdom, his own empire, to rule Carcosa, but in the end he was just another soul, trapped under the dark stars. And now, coming back to the world that doesn't exist, the king can manifest himself in many ways, as we've seen on the tales, but this time, the king is manifesting himself through this Minecraft world. He's trying to lure someone into his presence, or maybe the king was summoned here as suggested by the book. The people from this village were cultists, but this place doesn't seem like Carcosa to me. They were only victims. Their lord thought he was tricking the king, but he did exactly what he wanted. And so, he was offered the same higher understanding that reading the play brings. Since I believe playing in this world is its own version of the play, but their lord had the will to run away. He managed to censor the king's face, and left this book as a warning and as a way to contain the king. But unknowingly, he only helped to spread his influence. This world that doesn't exist is now the Song of Casilda. It bears the influence of the king. This is not only an adaptation of the play is irrelevant. How I picture Carcosa or what the writer said about Carcosa is irrelevant. His influence knows no boundary. It only takes the form of the piece of media the king will try to spread. That's exactly what's so scary about this being, and why it's so easily misunderstood or looked upon. And as we try to understand the king, and we obsessed ourselves with the play and what it all means, curiosity is leading us to obsession. Obsession leads us to madness, and madness is the key to Carcosa. And that's it for today. I hope you liked the video, guys, and if that's the case, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. That really helps me and the channel. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, or what other suggestions you have for future videos. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.